Here's another batch of independent horror from all over the world. It's just a little segment I like to call Low Budget Binge. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Scalper is new on-demand and digital download from Breaking Glass Pictures. It's directed and written by Ferrin. After being stalked and aiding in the capture of the serial killer known as the Scalper, psychic Clementine Carter, played by Susan Priver, finds herself seeing visions and being stalked anew by a copycat killer. But this time, Detective Hayden, played by Jake Busey, and his partner, Detective Lupino, played by Kate Patel, are on the case, tracking this murderer as he gorily scalps and stabs new victims in the LA area. From the first Nightcaller film, Clementine's dad, Charles, played by Robert Miano, recovers from his scalping in the hospital, and Bai Ling returns to crazy up the place. Scalper is a sequel to Nightcaller, a nice throwback to the 90s LA neo-noir era of sexy detective films, all accompanied by the sultry sounds of a shiny saxophone. Scalper loses most of its nuance and tries to be more of a straightforward detective flick. There is the usual back and forthings between detectives Hayden and Lupino, who seem to barely get along, yet have to work together to crack the case. This is interspersed with scenes of Clementine trying to get over her encounter with the killer in the last film, and a new killer adopting the Scalper motif and going on a new killing spree. Director Ferrin does a decent job juggling these three plot lines, though I do feel the Clementine plotline takes the back seat until the very end, making her heavy involvement in the finale feel off. Still, while the film sort of narratively clicks, Scalper lacks that stylistic flavor that appealed to me in the first one. Gone are the neon-lit streets and nods to the noirish aspects of detective films of old. Gone is that appreciation for old-school horror films. Much of Scalper is filmed during the day or in brightly lit rooms, which kills that ominous dark mood captured so well in the first film. While Scalper fails to meet the tone of the original, it makes up for it in gore. Taking a page from Leatherface's playbook, the killer wears the face of one of its victims. The scalpings are quite gory, and there is a fascination with shoving a hunting knife where the sun don't shine that really pushes the envelope. So for gorehounds, this one delivers quite copiously. Expect a lot of melodrama from actress Susan Priver, who pines over her PTSD from catching the first killer and dotes over her father in the hospital. Jake Busey does an okay job of playing a down-and-out cop, even though his partner, Kate Patel, looks more like a stripper than a cop. And Bai Ling? Well, Bai Ling continues to be a human whirlwind. I can only imagine filmmaker Ferrin casts her only to capture what she will say and do in front of the camera. I can't rightly recommend Scalper. Nightcaller wasn't a great movie either, but it did have a nice look and feel to it. Aside from some truly disturbing gore and trainwreck fascinating performances from some of the cast, Scalper just doesn't cut it. Guess Who is new streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Amelia Moses and written by Ian Carpenter, Aaron Martin, and Matt Wells. Michael, played by Cortion Moore, brings his fiancée Caitlin, played by Kia King, home to the trailer park where he grew up to meet his family. Though Caitlin is from a wealthy family, she's eager to meet Michael's family and celebrate a local tradition called mummering, which is a Christmas tradition celebrated in Newfoundland, Ireland, parts of the UK, and Philadelphia of all places. Mummering consists of dressing up in costumes and going door to door asking people riddles and having them guess who you are. As Michael, Caitlin, and his family join the festivities, Little do they know, a masked killer is in their midst. Guess Who is sort of your typical slasher film that takes place in a trailer park and centers on a holiday I've never heard of. This is different enough to make the whole film a little bit more interesting than the rest of the herd. The main conflict in the film is between the classes. Michael is self-conscious of his trailer park history and is hesitant to share his life with Caitlin, who comes from a much more affluent home. Guess Who does a pretty decent job of setting up this conflict and writing it all the way through until the end. Setting the film inside a trailer park, which has all kinds of baggage attached to it, involving poverty, drugs, and crime, it just gives the movie a lot to play with. All those issues arise in Guess Who as the young couple try to make the best of this trip. I have to say, I have a soft spot for bag-masked killers ever since I saw The Town That Dreaded Sundown as a kid late night on a grainy bootleg's Showtime feed, courtesy of a wire hanger covered in aluminum foil stuck to the back of my television. Thanks, Dad. The concept of the bag-masked killer has always creeped me out. The killer in Guess Who is just as creepy, and it worked for me. While the kills aren't exactly creative, at least the killer looked pretty spooky. Lead actress Kia King is strong in the role of Caitlin. She's sweet and spunky at times, and can put up a fight when facing down a tough situation, like when she has to deal with bag-masked killers. Unfortunately, she's wearing a very unconvincing wig throughout the entire movie, which distracted me quite a bit, but otherwise her performance is on point. As is lead actor Courtney Moore as Michael, both leads make for a personable couple to root for to make it through this treacherous night. Despite all of that, Guess Who devolves into a Scooby-Doo-like premise by the end, as all of the mystique is sapped away by a bumbling plot by a bunch of idiots. I will give it to this film for going with a bleak ending and committing to the class war bit all the way through. But the weak revelation at the end made the decent build-up and ripe with potential setting feel wasted. Guess Who is better than most Tubi original horror films, but it's just shy of great as it doesn't stick the landing. Punch is new on-demand and digital download from Miracle Media. It's directed and written by Andy Edwards. When Frankie, played by Alina Allison, decides to leave her small hometown and go to college, she decides to go out for one last night of partying with her friend Holly, played by Faye Campbell, and her ex-boyfriend Daryl, played by Macaulay Cooper, ignoring the pleas of her mother, who says she needs Frankie to stay home and take care of her. But as Frankie tries to forget her woes and bury herself in music, drugs, and sex, a local legend named Mr. Punch roams the streets to teach young rebellious teens to behave with his heinous laugh and a wooden bat. I found Punch to be interesting as it begins as a typical little slasher about one masked man stalking a young girl, but evolves into something much bigger and more insidious. Director-writer Andy Edwards amps up the intensity of Mr. Punch's attacks pretty much from beginning to end. Mr. Punch's path of destruction begins pretty early in the film, and while there is some getting to know you time so you get to feel for Frankie's plight, there's a lot left unanswered at the beginning concerning the fate of Frankie's father, but it's addressed by the end. So Edwards does a good job of tying all of the action, albeit seemingly random, to the central plot. It makes for a tight and succinct story with very little fat to parse through. Punch's wrath is quite brutal as he beats multiple people over the heads with his bat. Though there is little variety to his beatings, there are some very interesting settings for Punch to go nuts. An amusement park, a rocky beach, an array of are all locales utilized to great and gory effect. This change in setting makes the fact that only one weapon is used feel fresh every time. On top of that, the mask is pretty darn scary, and paired with that high-pitched and shrill voice, it's downright terrifying. I was surprised how well this one worked, especially the performances from the lead, Alina Allison, who has entrancing eyes and can kick some decent ass. Yes, there are a few contrived moments where Punch lets his guard down so Frankie can use his own weapons against him that had me slapping my head, but I was surprised how intense and disturbing Punch gets by the end, and the truth to the Punch legend is revealed. It all makes for an unsettling little slasher worth checking out. Sister Death is available streaming on Netflix. It's directed by Paco Plaza and written by Jorge Guerricaechevarría and Paco Plaza. In 1937, a young girl named Narcisa was said to see a divine vision during a solar eclipse, and was looked at as a great holy achievement by the devout in her Spanish village. 10 years later, Narcisa, played by Aria Bedmar, trains to be a nun at a convent and is looked at with great honor by most of the nuns, yet some question her worthiness of such praise. But upon arrival, Narcisa begins seeing and hearing strange things around the convent, and as another solar eclipse approaches, Narcisa fears that something horrible will happen to the convent and the young children there for guidance. I'm a huge Paco Plaza fan. Though he's not a household name in most horror arenas, he has been responsible for some downright terrifying horror films. Rec 2, Rec 3, A Christmas Tale, last year's La Abuela, and of course, Veronica, all of them truly scary films peppered with a master's hand for suspense and tension. With Veronica showing up on Netflix a while back, and most likely receiving huge numbers once discovered on the streaming service, it's a no-brainer that Netflix would pony up the funds for a prequel. Sister Death being a memorable character in Veronica, she is the likeliest of candidates to do a movie on. I guess if it worked for the Conjuring universe, Netflix feels they can build the same kind of franchise. Unfortunately, Sister Death pales in comparison to Veronica in almost every way. Don't get me wrong, the film is impeccably shot, and the lead, Aria Bedmar, the rest of the actresses playing the nuns, and even the child actors are all very convincing in their roles. There are numerous scenes that have a great build and a jarring payoff. Though it didn't get the big-budget theatrical release the Nun movies did, I do feel that Sister Death proves to be more effective than those films. But that's a pretty low bar to set if you're talking about quality cinema. It's nice that they brought back actresses Sandra Escacina and Consuelo Trujillo from the Veronica movie for a short bit, but honestly, it all feels like a mid-tier budget effort at a Conjuring franchise more than anything else. I think my issue with Sister Death is that most of the horrifying scenes have been done before. There are all kinds of strange visions and ominous omens that Sister Narcisa encounters as the eclipse nears. The children at the convent see the ghost of a young girl roaming the dark halls as well, offering up some moments as experienced through the eyes of children that took me back to the paranormal encounters seen in both Veronica and the Conjuring series. But the confession scene, the rites and rituals, the sermons that can be seen as equally holy or unholy, these moments were all too familiar to really give me much of a start. A typical Paco Plaza film is better than most horror out there, so don't take this criticism as a hard knock against Sister Death. If you haven't seen as many nunny horror films as I have before, you might find Sister Death quite scary. But just in the last few years, we've had The Nun, The Nun 2, Consecration, Agnes, not to mention all of the low-budget nun horror films that are a dime a dozen on Tubi. I simply feel the often used nunsploitation subgenre of horror is overplayed these days, and it's got to be something really special to stand out. Yes, the habits the nuns wear are creepy. Yes, the fact that someone is able to offer their entire life to become a nun and to give up a life of temptation and sin is strange in this apathetic day and age. And yes, maybe going to Catholic schools really can be scary to young impressionable minds, especially those who experienced Catholic school themselves. Sister Death does hit all of the nun horror tropes and adds quite a few potent jump scares. It's just all been done before, and with new nun movies releasing soon, including Immaculate, the new Sydney Sweeney vehicle, it appears it'll be done all over again, real soon. Lord of Misrule is available on demand and digital download from Magnet Releasing. It's directed by William Brent Bell and written by Tom de Ville. When her daughter Gracie, played by Evie Templeton, goes missing at a harvest festival, the town's new minister, Rebecca, played by Tuppence Middleton, and her husband Henry, played by Matt Stokoe, desperately look high and low, delving into local lore to find her. The spokesman of the town, Jocelyn Abbey, played by Ralph Ineson, and the police assure them that they are doing everything they can to find the girl, but there seems to be an ancient and secret tradition going on under the surface of this small village. The strongest aspect of the Lords of Misrule are the performances, so I'll talk about that first. Above everyone else, the witch's Ralph Ineson and his booming voice steals every scene they appear in. Einason is ominous and powerful as the local who seems to be the tribal leader of what appears to be a cult that is flourishing right under the nose of the church Rebecca is attempting to work for. Directly in conflict with Einason's Jocelyn is Rebecca, played by Tuppence Middleton, who is put through the emotional ringer as the mother of the abducted child. And while he's pretty much emasculated for the entire movie, Rebecca's husband Henry, played by Matt Stokoe, does an okay job with what he's given. There are a lot of aspects that I like about Lord of Misrule. This is definitely a folksy folk horror, with all the Harvest Festival decor looking authentic and elaborate. The masks of the locals are effectively creepy, and the feel of mystery and mysticism is definitely captured by director William Brent Bell. This is dark stuff dealing with heavy emotions, and Bell maintains that tone for the bulk of the movie, making it somewhat of a joyless affair since the abduction happens towards the beginning. Lord of Misrule offers up pretty much what has become standard in folk horror: harvest festivals, masked townfolk staring emotionally at a stranger in town, a ritual burning that has gone on in secret for ages, a missing persons case. It's all taken straight from the Wicker Man playbook, and while Lord of Misrule takes things a bit further into the supernatural realm in the final moments, the lead up to the very sudden and somewhat off-tone ending feels like a lot of movies you've seen before. I will admit the final moments surprised me, utilizing some effects that make this folk horror a bit more distinct than your run-of-the-mill type, but the strong performances, some creative production and costume design, and unusual ending doesn't really save it from being filled with many folk horror tropes. So there's a lot of tropes being talked about in this installment of Low Budget Binge. How do you feel about the folk horror and nun-horror subgenres? Do you think they're played out? Let me know what you thought about them down in the comments.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're doomed. Live the life that you are meant to live inside that reality.